Okay, so we're back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And this time, I wanted to dig into some materials that you shared with me
Great.
from a safety and health training workshop.
Okay.
And I think this will be applicable to a lot of our listeners.
Absolutely.
And basically, we're looking at a risk matrix.
Yes.
And I think the goal is to move beyond the basics of just sort of understanding what a risk matrix is.
Sure.
And really get into the nuts and bolts of how to actually use this thing effectively.
Yeah. At its core, it's deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful.
Right.
And it really hinges on two fundamental elements.
Right.
You've got the severity of a potential event.
Okay.
And you've got the probability of that event happening.
So the likelihood.
Exactly, the likelihood. And it's how you bring those two things together that gives the risk matrix its real value.
Okay, so looking at these workshop materials you provided, there are specific levels for both severity and probability.
Right.
So let's start with severity.
Okay.
The scale ranges from level 1, which might be something like minor first aid or just a really small amount of environmental impact.
Right.
And it goes all the way up to level 5, which is a much more serious situation with potentially multiple fatalities or really severe and lasting environmental damage.
Right. And that range is crucial to understand because you've got to be able to distinguish between different levels.
Yeah.
For example, we're looking at level 3.
Right.
Severity, which is major injury LTI.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a little scrape or a bruise. This is something that's going to result in lost work time.
Right.
A significant disruption.
Right.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And similarly, level 2, minor injury, minor environmental damage, that could be a sprained ankle needing a doctor's visit.
Yeah.
Or a small chemical spill that's quickly contained.
Right.
Those distinctions are important for consistent assessment.
Absolutely. So on the probability side, we also have a scale from 1 to 5, ranging from level 1, very unlikely, to level 5, very likely.
Exactly.
And level 3 in the middle there is considered possible, meaning it could happen. So then when we start combining these two factors,
right.
Let's say we have a severity level of 2,
okay,
a minor injury, and a probability of 3.
Possible. Okay.
That gives us a risk value of 2 times 3, which is 6.
Exactly. And those risk values then get translated into different levels of overall risk.
Okay.
So a risk value of 1 to 6, generally that's low risk.
Got it.
8 to 12, we're looking at medium risk.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything from 15 to 25, that falls into the high risk category.
Okay.
And this is where that prioritization element really kicks in.
So how would that prioritization work in a real world scenario?
Sure.
Let's say a company identifies 2 risks.
Okay.
One has a severity of 4.
Okay, so a potential single fatality.
Right. But a probability of only 2. So unlikely.
Unlikely.
All right.
Which gives us risk value of 8 or medium.
And then the other risk has a severity of 2.
Minor injury.
Right. But a probability of 4.
So likely to occur.
Likely. So also resulting in a risk value of 8.
Interesting.
So they both have the same risk value, but they're very different situations.
They are. And that's a great point. Highlighting that even with the same number, the implications can be vastly different.
Right.
Well, both of those situations need attention. The potential consequences of that first scenario, the fatality, that's going to trigger a much more immediate and thorough investigation.
Makes sense.
You really want to understand why a potentially severe event, even if it's unlikely, could occur.
Right.
And resources are probably going to be allocated to implementing preventative measures with a much higher urgency than that second scenario where the focus might be more on reinforcing existing safety protocols to reduce the likelihood of those minor injuries.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about the number itself.
No, it's not.
It's about understanding the nature of the potential harm. And I think this matrix provides a really structured way to have those conversations.
Yeah, it does.
And to move beyond just reacting to incidents.
Right.
To really proactively thinking about what could go wrong and how likely it is.
And by having that structured approach,
you're
moving away from relying solely on intuition or past experience, which can be biased or incomplete.
Yeah, for sure.
And it forces a more objective evaluation, which leads to better informed decisions about how to allocate resources.
Right.
And implement safety measures.
So to sum up this whole deep dive, the core takeaway is that the risk matrix, by combining those two elements of potential severity and probability into a single risk value, gives us a simple but powerful method for categorizing risks and informing our actions.
It does. And as you consider this further, Think about how you could apply this type of structured thinking in other areas.
Yeah.
Not just formal safety assessments, but where else in your work or even your personal life could you benefit from evaluating potential downsides and their likelihood in a more systematic way?
Interesting.
What unexpected decisions might gain clarity by considering this framework of severity and probability?
Food for thought.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye. Bye.